Michael Jordan is not only the best basketball player, but he's the most exciting basketball player to ever play.
Tatum fires away, pumps it in, 51 for Jason Tatum.
The Big Three NBA podcast is powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network.
Welcome to another edition of the Big Three NBA podcast. I'm your host, Sherrod Blakely, with a special guest today, Miss Callie Lawson-Freeman from Yahoo Sports. Callie, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm coming at you from the sunny state of Florida, as are you. So that's
yes. Apart yet still together. That's how we do things. Want to just kind of really jump right into the conversation because Callie is a busy woman and we don't want to waste her time. The Celtics, they're riding this 9-game winning streak. They're clearly the best team record-wise. From a national perspective, because I know you deal with a lot of NBA teams, but where do you see the Celtics in the grand scheme of the NBA landscape at this point?
That's a great question. I mean, they're the best team right now. Like their league bet, that 46-12, that is by a landslide the best record. You know, they're leading the league. And even their most recent win, I will say it wasn't like the most convincing win, 117-99 over like the shorthanded 76ers. But I mean, Jaylen Brown, 31 in that matchup. Jason Tatum had 29 points. And I know we're going to talk about him more, but like they're the team to beat.
And when you look at the Celtics, the one thing that kind of jumps out to a lot of folks is just the depth that they have and the fact that they can kind of hurt you in a lot of different ways. And I know with you being out in Cali, yes, Callie lives in California. I know, crazy. You get to see a lot of the Western Conference teams, and I'm just curious, what are some of the teams that you see out west that kind of stand out to you from what you've seen?
I mean, obviously the Timberwolves are like the team in the West right now. And then you have the Thunder, who are having a season that reminds me of my beloved Kings season last year. You know, I feel like they're having this great they have the number 2 spot in the West. So like they're playing great. Then we have the Nuggets, obviously. Like they're the reigning NBA champions. And then right there is the Suns. So to me, like that's what stands out. And then Kings, Lakers, Warriors are 8, 9, and 10 just trailing there. And so last night, obviously the whole story was LeBron and that crazy performance in the fourth quarter for the comeback win. Mm-hmm. And those are the kind of things that from a national perspective, you have so much fun with because there's so much talk about. This man is 39 years old, you know? So that, like the storylines from that are just endless. And obviously we're at a point in the season where we're trying to like get a glimpse of the playoff picture. Like, where will LeBron fit into that? Where will Steph fit into that? Like, where will the Kings potentially fit into that? So I don't know. The West is really interesting. I feel like the Suns are an interesting team. It's funny, at dinner the other night, you were saying the Clippers were going to be like the team. And now it's like they just got embarrassed in their last game against the Lakers and crypto. So, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot. We could talk for a long time about the West.
Yeah. And the thing about the West is that there's always this wild West dynamic to it, but it seems this year it's wilder than usual. When you talk about the Lakers, you talk about, Golden State and teams that have kind of historically been among the top tier teams. That hasn't been the case this season. But is there still a sense of, how can I put this? Is there a concern if you're like, let's say, a team like Minnesota and a team like Oklahoma City, that you get to the playoffs, you've had this great season, your fans are jacked for a deep playoff run, and then you look across the other side of the court and you see the Lakers, or you see, Golden State perhaps, sneaking in. How much of concern is there among those top tier teams that they might see kind of almost like what we'd call like a legacy organization like Golden State or the Lakers waiting for them?
I mean, it's a big concern. I hate to say, I don't want to wish anything negative on the Thunder, but that's kind of what I see happening because I've seen it. I just watched it firsthand with the Kings. Like that was a great season. You get yourself a great seed for your first playoff appearance in 16 seasons. Like it, and then here comes Stephen Curry. You know what I mean? And it's just terrible, squashing your hopes and dreams. And I feel like that could happen to the Thunder. I feel like maybe the Timberwolves are less, I guess, subject to something like that, but definitely that's something I worry about with the Thunder. It feels like their Cinderella shoes are going to come falling off soon, just because maybe it's the cynicism in me from last season, but
Yeah.
that's what it's like.
Yeah, we're gonna get back to your beloved Sacramento Kings because I will not. I want everyone to always feel comfortable when they come on, the Big Three podcast, and knowing how much you love your Sacramento Kings. We're gonna show them some love a little bit later, but I want us to get back to the Celtics for a minute, because as we pointed out, and most people know this, they have the best record in the NBA. They're starting to put even more distance record-wise between themselves and the rest of the East and the NBA in a grander scheme. But there's some teams in the Eastern Conference that might have something to say about Boston just kind of, running away with things. And I wanted us to kind of have a conversation about, some of those teams and just kind of get your thoughts on the likelihood or the chances that that particular team to pose a major threat to the Boston Celtics. And I wanted to start off with the Cleveland Cavaliers, who have been playing some of their best basketball of late, have provided us with some of the greatest unexpected highlights of late. What's your take on Cleveland and just their chances of knocking off the Celtics if it came to that in the playoffs?
It's interesting that you would point that out. Obviously, we had that great Max Strus highlight that was fantastic, but then they followed that up by losing to the Bulls in double overtime last night. And
Right.
so I think there's something to be said for that. The team could have been exhausted. It seemed like they were struggling on the boards from the free throw line, but I think that if you look at the quality of wins and losses, like they've blown out a good amount of teams, but they haven't been on the other end of that very much. And so I think though, when you kind of compare them to the Celtics, they're 20-5 since January 2nd, I believe. And then so is Boston. So it's like the Celtics are not giving any other team room to make up ground and kind of like close in on them. And that's where things get difficult for Cleveland, because it's like you can be as hot as you want to. They're, in my opinion, not the team that I would be concerned about. I know we're going to go down the list, but it's not the Cavs. I'm not concerned about them with the Celtics.
Right. Okay, I am in the corner. Here's the thing about Cleveland. I think Cleveland is there's no question they're playing great basketball, but my concern with them is that they peaked too soon. When I look at their roster and look at what they're doing, pretty much everyone on their roster is having a career year or pretty close to that, and that typically doesn't translate when you get to the playoffs. And if they're play a notch or two below where they're at now, there's no way that they're going to beat the Celtics in a best of seven. And then that's the thing I have to remind folks about, that the playoffs, it's a best of seven. It's not whether you can beat a team. Can you beat a team 4 times? That's the challenge that I think a lot of folks are going to have with the Celtics. Because I do believe the Celtics will have at least 1 or 2 playoff series where they'll lose a couple games, maybe even go to a game 7. But I don't think anyone is built necessarily to beat them in a best of 7. But one team that certainly strongly disagrees with me on that is the Milwaukee Bucks, to the point where even with one of the best records in the NBA at that time, they still decided, well, you know what? We need to make a change at the top. So we're going to go and get Doc Rivers, which ironically, Doc, yes, he's a championship coach. He's top 10 all time in wins, but he also is the NBA record keeper for most playoff series losses after going up 3-1. And having been a witness to the first of those major meltdowns, it's something that kind of gnaws at him a little bit. But just your take on the Milwaukee Bucks and just their chances of, getting back to where they were a couple years ago, which was an NBA champion.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. Damian Lillard last night mentioned that when he joined the Bucks, he thought they were going to be the Celtics. Like he called them out by name and thought that they were going to have the same season, and that's obviously not been the case. You mentioned the midseason firing of Adrian Griffin. So now they kind of have to find their footing again. It's not been completely smooth sailing under Doc Rivers, but I think now they might be in a position to put some things together, especially if you look at their 2 matchups. Like the Celtics and the Bucks are 1-1 this season. So if you look at the quality of those games, the second matchup was a bad loss for the Celtics. They had a 3-point win in November that turned into a 33-point blowout just last month. So, and actually, now that I think about that game, I remember being so bad that TNT cut away from it. Like that's not good. So you have
to, you don't see that happen too often.
Yeah. So I think we're at the point where you got to start thinking what's changed with the Celtics, what's changed with the Bucks. And I can't say that I feel like the Celtics have improved significantly since that loss last month, to the point where I would expect a different outcome if they played next month, So I don't know. But I think, to me, the Bucks are like the most interesting matchup. I also like Miami, which I know we'll talk about, but the Bucks they're formidable in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. But let's shift to Miami, because everyone likes Miami, particularly when it comes to the Celtics, because Miami has shown the ability to kind of, let's just be honest, take the Celtics places the Celtics don't want to go, and put the Celtics in positions where they're uncomfortable, and thus find themselves watching instead of preparing for the next playoff series after playing Miami. What's your take on the Heat and what you see in them this season? And are they a legitimate threat to come out of the East, even though record-wise they may not necessarily have been in that top tier for long?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's about the record. I think the Heat know when to heat up. They've shown that they can heat up at the right time.
Well played. I like that. The Heat know when to heat up. Okay, I'm gonna write that one down. I like that.
Thank you. They've shown that they can ramp it up when it's really important and crucial. Right now, they're on a 5-game winning streak. They play the Nuggets tonight, which I think could potentially be a good barometer for where they are. It's like the first final. Is it the first finals rematch of this season?
I believe it might be. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's interesting too, because the Nuggets have won 4 straight. So these are 2 teams that have been to the finals, and you see they're kind of ramping up around the same time. And now we get to compare them to one another. What I will say is that the Celtics have beat the Heat 3 times this season. And that's not great, but for some reason, I just still have this interest in the Heat as an opponent for the Celtics. Like maybe it's the Heat culture, maybe it's the recency bias with the finals, but there's something to that. I think, like, you've been to the finals, you tasted it, you didn't win, and the Celtics are further removed from that. Like they've been, to the mountaintop and not, reached the peak, but the Heat, it's fresher in their mouths. So I don't know. That's how I feel.
Yeah, the Heat, the one thing that I always come back to when you talk about the Miami Heat is Spoelstra, who I think is the best coach in the NBA. He's the one guy that you have seen find ways to win, whether he's got great talent, mediocre talent, it doesn't matter. He figures out how to maximize the skills of his players and get them in many respects to play, bigger and better than they normally would play. And so that's the concern if you're the Boston Celtics. But I think the difference this year is that the Celtics understand there's a now or never mindset, I think, with the Boston Celtics this year, that they're either going to win a championship this year or there may be dramatic changes. I don't think you'll break up the Jays per se, but I do think that they'll start looking a lot closer at, some of their other core guys and figuring out, why are we not getting over the hump? Because at this point, Tatum and Brown, and Tatum, whose birthday is this week, and he'll be 26 years old. They're at a point now where you really can't talk about them being on the come up or learning and all that. You either get it done now or you don't. And I think that's part of the narrative with this team all season long. And it's going to be really a storyline that I'm extremely excited to see play out over time.
Football season may be over, but the action on the floor is heating up. Whether it's a tournament season or the fight for a playoff home court, there's no shortage of high-stakes basketball moments this time of year. Get in on the excitement with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app, where you can turn your hoops knowledge into serious cash. Testing my skills on Prize Picks this season is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $1,000 with just a few taps. Prize Picks is really simple to play, and I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. Download the app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Use the code CLNS for the first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
You had mentioned the Denver game in Miami, and the Nuggets are led by two-time MVP Nikola Jokic, who once again is doing Jokic-like things and putting himself in position to once again be on the short list of MVP candidates. But, there's this kid in Boston named Jason Tatum. His team kind of has the best record in the league. He's kind of giving you 27-ish, 6, 7, 8 rebounds, 4, 5 assists per game. Good numbers. And yet, when it comes to the MVP narrative, there's usually 3, 4, 5, even 6 guys who are viewed upon as being more MVP ready than him. I'm curious, what's your take on Jason Tatum in this whole MVP conversation? Because I have heard everything from he should be top 3 because he's the best player on the best team, or look at his numbers compared to some of the other guys. There's no way he should be in the top 5. What's your take on Jason Tatum and the whole MVP conversation?
I absolutely think he should be in the conversation. I think he should be leading the conversation. I think the point of being the MVP is being the best player on the best team. To me, that's MVP. And that's Jason Tatum right now. So I think the case against him seems purely statistical. As you mentioned, his scoring is down, I think, more than 3 points from last season, which puts him behind Luka Doncic, SGA, Giannis, and those are the people that he's being compared to. And so I think his scoring being down is actually a credit to him, which is why we've heard so many endorsements for him. In like recent weeks, we heard Kristaps Porzingis say, he could say F it and score 30, but like that wouldn't guarantee us the win. He sacrifices for the team. So you've got Kristaps coming out saying he should be MVP. You have, I've seen so many endorsements. I think Draymond Green, like there are multiple people coming out and saying that he should be in the conversation. But one thing I've learned is that so much of the narrative that we come to accept comes from the players themselves. And it wasn't until just last week, I think, that Jason Tatum sat down with ESPN and said that he thinks he's the best player in the league. And I think that really does matter. Like a lot of people feel like these players shouldn't have to make the MVP cases themselves, which I agree with. It's not their jobs to advocate for their just due. But I think him saying that goes a long way. Because if you look at his career to date, you mentioned that he's going to turn 26 this month. And it's so funny because for so long in his career, the joke was, wow, he's doing this and he's just 19. Like,
yeah, he spent more time at 19 than yeah. I mean, it wasn't until maybe a year or two ago where people like, oh, wow, he's not 19 anymore.
Like he's about to be 26. But I think that plays into what I'm saying is like, there have been so many misconceptions that have just like been woven into the narrative of his career that it takes him a while sometimes to push back against. And I think him saying, I'm the best player, it's me, it matters. I think more people will start coming out, like Draymond Green, like his teammates, like his coach, like they will continue to make that case and people will have to pay attention. That's just kind of how the news cycle works now. Like once we get it from the players themselves, that goes a long way.
Is there anything you can think of that he would need to do or should do to kind of break through that noise and be seen as one of the top 3, top 4 MVP candidates this year?
I think he should keep talking mess. Like keep saying that he's the best. I stand behind that because to me, like I said, the numbers shouldn't change. Like you said, you have someone like Kristaps Porzingis, you have a solid squad. This is a well-developed team. This roster has been kind of fine-tuned, I think. And so he's surrounded by some solid players. He's getting them the ball. He's playmaking. So he's not going to be the leading scorer of every single game. That's okay. But I think if he continues to be vocal about the fact that he's I guess, sacrificing his statistics this season for the team's overall success, more people will understand that. I'm not sure why that's not a larger storyline right now, but it seems like the more that he talks about it, the more his team talks about it, people are gonna like. I think he'll move up in the voting odds for sure.
Yeah, the one thing about Jason Tatum that and our good friend Vincent Goodwill, him and I had this conversation a few weeks ago. Um, Tatum has been so good for so long that we almost take it for granted.
Yeah,
And because he's been basically a guy that's been in the mid to high 20s as a scorer, gets you, 6, 7, 8 rebounds a game and does all those things. And he's consistently doing that night in, night out. We're looking for him to do something extraordinary beyond that because that's his baseline, which is kind of it's unfair to him that he has this ridiculous baseline. Like an average year for Jason Tatum is a career year for like 85% of the NBA. And that's works against him in these arguments. I think for Jason to like seriously become a threat to win the MVP, he has to keep winning, obviously. But he
yeah,
also has to do some kind of extraordinary thing statistically, like average 30 and 10 and 5 or something like that over an 8, 9, 10 game stretch, which to me, it I just don't like the idea that he's got to put up numbers in order to get the respect that you should be getting when you win. It's almost, and Jason and I, we've had this conversation before, and he's talked about it and he's played like it as far as I just want to win. I want to do whatever I can to help this team win. And early in his career, he thought the only way he could do that was get buckets. And then he realized, oh, wait a minute, I'm scoring 25 a game and we're losing to the top teams. And I'm only got 3 assists. I got 2 assists. So he's become more of a playmaker in the last couple of years. And even that's not enough to get him over the hump of being considered a legitimate top 3, top 5 MVP candidate. And so it feels as though that the baseline for him is different than anyone else. And the goalposts keep moving because at some point they say, well, you got to win a championship. Last I checked, Jokic, his first MVP came before he won a title. So it's not like the championship itself is going to guarantee you in that conversation. It's really interesting just how Jason Tatum has been kind of viewed among the top tier players. Joel Embiid did not win. Joel can't even get out of the damn second round of the playoffs, and yet he's got an MVP. So it's the goalpost just keeps swinging, and the baseline is well above sea level when it comes to Jason Tatum relative to others.
But that's what I'm saying. I think he should run his mouth some more, tell his players to talk a little bit more. The goalpost will move in his favor, I think. Because like you said, it's a moving like target. So it's gotta like this could be the year that things kind of play out and fit together. I think I don't know. There's got to be a point where it's rewarded to sacrifice. And I feel like this could be the year for that, especially now we talk so much about the way that we talk about basketball and like we expect so much from these players. Tatum winning MVP would be a great counter to so much of that discussion. Like right now we say, oh, people don't want to talk about basketball. They just want to talk about controversial talking points. But like what Jason Tatum is doing right now contradicts all of that. So that now's the time to kind of answer that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he really does seem to embody what you want your best player to be about, which is winning games. And that's why I love the fact that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, excuse me, is also in that conversation. He's doing great things at OKC. His numbers are a little bit more gaudy than Tatum's, in part because Tatum has a better team. But I wanted to kind of bring it full circle because, again, I love when people come on here, and I love to talk about things that I know matter to them. And you and your Sacramento background, your Sacramento Kings, took us on a nice little journey last season. Actually made the playoffs, and Mike Brown is someone I've known for a really long time. I'm glad that he got an opportunity to lead that team because Mike's a good coach. He's a really good coach, particularly when it comes to getting teams that haven't had a ton of success to making them respectable and contenders and competitive.
Yeah.
But things have kind of leveled out a little bit. The Kings are like 8th in the West. They've lost a couple games in a row. What's the vibe among Kings Nation right now? Because after last season, this isn't exactly where I think Kings fans thought they would be a year later.
No, I think it's so interesting that you mentioned the vibe because that stood out to me so much. I don't obviously have the opportunity to go to every single Kings game and cover them in that capacity, but I did go to Media Day. And I remember thinking the vibe here feels so different than last year. I think last year, or yeah, last year, it seemed like there was so much excitement and energy. Like there was this viral clip of Mike Brown yelling at Media Day because he heard like one of his players yelling for a photo. And I feel like that encompassed the energy for the whole season. It was just so much new energy, so much excitement. But I think with what they accomplished last season, which is breaking a historic playoff drought, came some pressure immediately in Media Day. Every single player that would come up to for the scrum just to talk to the group of reporters, every single player said that they want to win a championship, which is what you should say, absolutely. But Mike Brown said the same thing, which tells me that there is pressure in that organization. Like it's not last year. It's not, oh, we just got to break this playoff drought. And I know even last year, it wasn't just to break the playoff drought. The goal was to make a run. I get it. But I think that this year, the pressure is different. And so I think what we're seeing now with the Kings season they're winning. Like they beat the Nuggets, I think 3 times this season. So they're winning solid games, but they're also losing games that they conceivably could win. And when you listen to, post-game comments, it seems like there's a lot of tinkering being done, like with lineup changes, with playing time. And I sense that that's a little bit frustrating for the players. Like even last night, I think it was last night against the Nuggets, Kevin Huerter was frustrated. Like when he was asked kind of what went wrong, he was like, I don't know, but I wish I was out there to help us more. I think he played 18 minutes and he scored like 4 points. So it's like it seems to be there's some frustration, and that seems like a natural progression to what happened last year. So I think, I don't know, it would have been unrealistic for any Kings fan to think, okay, we broke the playoff drought last season, now we're gonna win the finals. Like no, but I think that maybe there's a little bit of disappointment to this point, but the season's not over. Anything can happen, especially in the West, like we talked about. You just never know.
Yeah.
It's interesting. The vibes are very interesting. So it's funny that you led with that.
Well, the thing about the Kings, they've been for the longest time, the Clippers, they've been I kind of put them in the category of the lovable losers because they lose a lot of games, but you love them nonetheless. They just don't win. And, last season was great, good run. This season, I don't think it's been what they expected. And my concern for the Kings and Kings Nation is that it's not going to get easier the final stretch of the season. They've got the 9th toughest remaining schedule in the NBA. And I'm looking at just some of the teams that they still have, on the docket that they've got to deal with. You've got the Celtics, you got the Mavericks, OKC, the Clippers, Milwaukee Bucks. They play the Knicks twice. They are not going to get too many nights, if any nights, off the remainder of this season. And my concern is that, a lot of the frustration that you're talking about, Callie, I think is real. And typically when teams are frustrated and not really sure of how to break through, and the next thing you know, you've got a team that's coming to town or that you're going into their town that can break your will because they're that good. How are they going to have the resolve and fortitude to handle that? Are they built mentally tough enough to deal with that? And that's my concern for the Kings, because I would love to see them, make a little bit of noise in the playoffs. I know that that's your team. My good friend Kyle Draper, he's on the play-by-play with the Kings. I would love to
I
see
saw Kyle Draper at Media Day.
exactly. I would love for you guys to have a great season, but I'm feeling real nervous about the Kings breaking through because, like we were talking about earlier, when you got teams on the back, what I call the back nine of the conference, like the Lakers and Golden State, teams that on any, and particularly Golden State, now that Chris Paul is back, they can go on a 6, 7, 8, 9 game winning streak, and next thing you know, that team that was in 10th, 11th is now firmly in the playoffs as maybe a 7th seed, or maybe lock themselves into that play-in spot. And I worry about, for them to move up, someone has to move down and out. And I hope it's not the Kings, because I think they've got really good players. De'Aaron Fox, Sabonis, really good players. But I'm concerned. I have concerns about, and Hurd is one of my favorite players. Tough, gritty kid. I love when he was in Atlanta.
He's really fun to watch.
But I'm nervous about the Kings being able to solidify themselves, as a playoff team.
Me too. I also am nervous. And I get the sense that the Kings are also nervous, which is not ideal. So I'm with you.
Yeah, yep. Well, listen, this has been awesome. We'll have to do it again at some point. Next time, we'll figure out a way to bring in the rest of the gang, Kwani and Gary Washburn, to also be part of this. Callie Lawson, Yahoo Sports, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you.
Thank you.